For more on the Sudan war, we are joined by journalist Faisal Elbagi. He is in the Kenyan capital, Nairobi. Faisal, appreciate your time. It's been almost, in fact, it'll be 12 months on Monday since this war started. What has perpetuated this conflict for the last 12 months?
Well, the conflict has been an ongoing conflict, and people of Sudan, they think that, and I myself have seen that, the Sudan conflict or the Sudan war is being underreported. African situation and worldwide. So really the country conflict is underreported. So whatever news now, whatever information now we have on the situation of the Sudan, whether it's on the military in the two warring parties, it's still underreported. So we're really afraid that this war will continue, and people, they feel that also the world, they have left Sudan behind. And we're afraid that it's going to be a forgotten conflict. This is the issue which we're really afraid about after 1 year of continuous brutality against the civilians and the civil entities.
Now, Faisal, you talk about an underreporting, which I suppose implies the fact that not all that is happening is being reported on, right? But we are fully aware that there is a lot of brutality, as you mentioned, to use your word. What is it that we're not aware of? Outside of what we're hearing, what else is happening?
What is happening now in Sudan, it's a continuous, ongoing, brutal war against civilians. The two warring parties, SAF, Sudan Army Force, and RSF, both of them are continuing human rights abuses, are continuing stealing the people's money, the people's properties, and millions of people, they have forced to flee the country. First of all, people, they flee from the conflict zone, whether it's in Khartoum or Darfur, to a neighboring, what they call safe zones. But unfortunately, day by day, with the war continuing, there is no place where we can say that it's a safe place in Sudan. So people in the western part of Sudan, Darfur, they flee to neighboring Chad. People in the other part, in the southern part, they flee to South Sudan. People, they flee to Ethiopia, they flee to Eritrea, they flee to Egypt, and they flee also to the neighboring countries, Uganda and Kenya. I can say now millions of Sudanese people, they were forced to flee the country because it's a brutal war and it looks it's an ongoing war. And although we are hearing that, the international community, they're trying to push for 18th of April, Jeddah, in Saudi Arabia meeting. But to be honest, people are not optimistic yet. We are not optimistic about that negotiations because the two warring parties are not caring at all about the humanitarian situation, about killing of the people. And this is the issue which really we should concentrate. Now another issue is coming, the starvation. The country will go into most huge starvation in Africa or worldwide. Because the farmers, whether in Darfur or in Kordofan or even in Al Jazeera, they are not farming. They were forced not to farm. So this is also another issue. And if we look into the UN bodies and the international bodies, it was very clear that said by the UN bodies that whatever amount they are requesting for, it's not being paid. So Sudan is under fire now. It's a pity, really.
Faisal, let's talk about the main actors in this, the Sudanese armed forces and the rapid military and the rapid support forces. What is it that they are pushing for? I mean, what is the motivation behind this conflict? And you've talked about the 18th of April as being an opportunity to reach some form of truce or settlement, but you're still not hopeful. Why?
I'm still not hopeful because both of them, they are not yet listening to the international community or listening to the local people that stop the war. Let the humanitarian aid pass, make safe passing areas. They are still destroying each and everything in the country. They are destroying the civilian entities. Hospitals, they are out of work. Schools are out of work. Each and everything. There is real, very conflict bad conflict zone now in Sudan. We are afraid that millions will continue to die because of this situation. And the two warring parties, unfortunately, they don't care because they are just fighting for their powers. They want to gain power. Unfortunately, when they started this war, both of them, the RSF and the SAF, they were thinking that it's just a simple battles. They will take it in few hours, then later they say in few weeks, then later they say in few months. Now it is 1 year and still the fighting is going on in more brutal way than ever before. Bombarding areas, civilian areas, forcing people to flee from the so-called safe zones, whether in Al Jazeera or in Al Gadarif. And we are afraid that this war may expand to a bit north or southern part of the country. And if it reaches that stage, Sudan, the full Sudan will be under fire. This is an issue. But the most important thing which we can say that with this continuous war, it's not only Sudanese people are going to suffer. The neighboring countries, the whole region, the IGAD region, the neighboring countries, and you know Sudan is being neighboring to many countries. And all those neighboring countries, they will be targeted. And if this war is allowed to spread in the region, that will be a really devastation war.
Faisal, let's touch a little bit on the humanitarian crisis. Obviously, women and children in particular are greatly impacted by this war. So there's a lot of instability. A lot of people have had to be resettled or forced out of their areas of abode. But many of these individuals are also then being forced into countries that are bordering Sudan. You've talked about places like Chad. What sort of conditions do they find themselves in when they relocate or when they're forced into those different countries as refugees?
Unfortunately, people whom even people, they have to run from war first of all. They have to run from the conflict zone, from the war itself. But when they reach, for example, in Chad, the camps were not prepared well to have them as new settlers. There is a lack of medicine, lack of food, lack of everything, and this are the records of the UN agencies, not our agencies, not our records as human rights defenders or as journalists or at that. It's a real the century conflict. Let's call it, this is the century conflict, war in Sudan. So I think it's very important for the international community to think twice to find, by all means, to stop this war.
Now, one of the biggest disparities around war, particularly in the African continent, is the amount of support that Africa gets or how quickly the world reacts. So, again, if we go back a few months to the Russia-Ukraine conflict and we look at the amount of support that conflict has gotten, we look at the support that Israel is getting, in fact, or has been getting from many countries to continue its bombardment of Gaza. It seems to be an unfortunate state of affairs. How do you react to the amount of support that Sudan is getting just on a humanitarian requirement?
Yeah, in fact, we spoke about that. We as human rights defenders and as journalists and even as lay citizens, we have seen, how the world is reporting what's happening in Ukraine, then later what's happening in Gaza. And we can see the international media is concentrating on Gaza and concentrating on Ukraine and other places, but not in Sudan. And information is very important. So if we want the whole world to understand exactly what's happening in Sudan, I think some African channels like your channel and African media, they also should do their best to go to Sudan, to go to the neighboring countries. If you are not allowed to enter Sudan, instead you can go to a place like Kenya to see the refugees, a place like Uganda to see the refugees, a place like Chad to see the refugees and to report on them. I'm sure that it's not easy even for the media professionals or the media institutions to go inside the country. Now, Recently, we have managed to form a coalition of 25 independent media organizations. We call it Sudan Media Forum. And this Sudan Media Forum, we are doing our best to raise up the voice of the people of Sudanese people, to tell the world that Sudan is under fire, to tell that Sudan is underreported, and we are doing our best. And this is a very good coalition for more than 25 independent media houses and organizations, including radio, including TV, including internet websites, and so on. But still, I want to also to mention one important thing here. As the war is continuing on the ground, there is a war on the media. The two warring parties, they have their own media, they spend on it, and this media is a propaganda media. It do a lot on hate speech, on separation of the people, on this issue of hate speech. It's very important that we have to think of it, because this media, which is owned by the two warring parties, is still continuing giving a propaganda for the war. It's a pity, really.
Final thoughts on the role of the African Union in, to a large extent, try to deal with this war and obviously broker a deal. What has their involvement been, and how effective has it been?
Still, we haven't seen anything on the ground. Still, we haven't seen that there is a huge push on the two warring parties to go to the table of the negotiations. One more important thing also, these negotiations, whether they're by the African Union or by the IGAD or by the Troika in Jeddah or whatever, any kind of negotiations should not leave the issues of impunity aside. The two warring parties, they want to have impunity, they want to have what they call amnesty, they want to run away with their brutality. But in this war, it's being reported and it's being documented well. There is there is crimes against humanity and genocide crimes. So these are international issues, and they should not be thought about. They should be on the negotiations of the table. We are afraid that as human rights defenders and even the civil society and the Sudanese, that the two warring parties should not award it by bringing the situation just 1 day or 2 days before the 15th of April 2023. Accountability must be, there should be an accountability, very important, because the victims and the survivors of this brutal war are still looking for justice and continuing to fight for justice, and they will never, the Sudanese people, they will never leave these issues of justice this time. Historically in Sudan, after revolutions, after any change against dictatorial regimes, people, they say forgiveness. But this war, it has to stop these thoughts and ideas of just forgiveness and impunity and non-accountability. Those two warring parties, the perpetrators of the human rights abuses in Sudan, in this war, should be accountable and should be taken to the justice. That is a very important thing. And this is in the heart of the agenda of the Sudanese lay people, the victims, whether they're in Darfur or in Kordofan or in Blue Nile or in Khartoum or in anywhere. Now, and we can see that now the young generation, the youth, the women, they really they have suffered a lot. So now I think we have got nothing to lose but our chains, and we have got nothing to lose than to continue building peace movement from the lay Sudanese people to stop the war, to allow the humanitarian access to reach the people, needed people, and the agenda of the accountability and no impunity should be in the middle of any negotiations. This is the voice of the Sudanese people.
Faisal, appreciate your time. Thanks so much for speaking to us today.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I appreciate it.